Chapter 1. Antonio.
"You're stalling, Petrakis. Get on with it,"
I said when the attorney paused again while reading Matthias Rosso's will. I didn't miss the way Petrakis's eyes went to the open boardroom door.
"Or are you expecting someone?"
Rather than answering, Petrakis cleared his throat and focused on the will in front of him, flipping pages as if attempting to find his place.
"You were listing the properties our father owned?"
Alexandra said. My sister's tone was kind, with just a hint of humor. In that, and in her dark beauty, she was so much like our mother had been. Whenever she spoke, I could almost hear my mother cajoling me to eat my vegetables, or leave my stinky shoes outside at our villa on Cato Antiquari. She'd been gone for years, and now my father was too. Gone a month. His death was shocking in its suddenness, but Matthias Rosso had never been one to take his time or ease into things. When he wanted something, he barreled through any obstacles to get it. And then, as soon as he was done with it, he dropped it like a bad habit. I could almost picture him deciding he was done with life and then dropping dead on the spot. If anyone had that kind of sheer, stubborn willpower, it was my father. And now the man was gone. All that power and authority snuffed out for good. There was nothing left for me and my siblings but to get through this reading of the will and learn how Matthias had chosen to divvy up everything he'd left behind.
"Eva, would you pour me a glass of water?"
Petrakis directed his request to the youngest of us, probably assuming she'd readily do it.
"Here you go."
Eva only nudged the pitcher and a glass closer, not directly calling him out, but still making it clear that she wasn't his assistant. I gave Eva a subtle nod of approval, getting a wink in exchange. Then I turned back to the lawyer. I was enough my father's son to have no patience with stalling tactics.
"What does our father's will leave us?"
I leaned across the table.
"Spell it out now."
Petrakis gulped nervously but began to read. "To my daughters, Alexandra and Eva, I leave each a trust fund of $50 million to be administered by their older brother, Antonio, until each of my daughters reaches the age of 25. If either of my daughters should marry before the age of 25, I leave it up to my son to release the trust or to continue to manage it." Irritation tightened my jaw, and my low growl made Petrakis glance at me. "Your father was concerned about fortune hunters."
"Obviously. He must have forgotten that my sisters are intelligent women able to make their own choices about men and money," I said.
"It is the 21st century,"
Alexandra added dryly.
"Yes, well, Matthias wanted you all to find the right partners in life."
What father wanted was to do the finding himself. He never approved of our choices. There had been one time, just one, when I had lost my head when it came to love. I'd gotten so tangled up in an American student studying in Greece that I hadn't known which way was up. My father had been horrified, convinced the girl was a gold digger. He'd thrown money at a private investigator who delivered a stack of suspicious pictures and a whole trove of nasty insinuations. The next time the girl had come to see me, father had been there, eager to let her know exactly what he thought of her, trying to get her hooks into his son. The girl had fled crying, and she'd never returned. Father had said it was because she was embarrassed at getting caught out in her schemes. Maybe that was true. Or maybe she'd been hurt and upset because she'd been innocent of all those accusations, and Matthias had been the schemer, bribing the investigator to make up lies about her so that I would let her go. I'd never been sure, but I'd certainly been a lot less willing to trust after that. Any woman could be a gold digger looking to use me, and anything my father said could be a lie. It had created a strain between father and son that had never fully healed. And it had made father even more determined to ensure that his children chose their partners wisely. Which is how my sisters ended up with absurd conditions like this tied to their inheritances. I barely managed to bite back a growl.
Continue, I said. I leave this world with a heavy heart for the wrongs I have done to my son Antonio. There was a time when Antonio found it easy to trust others, but that changed, and I blame myself for that. I felt my sister's questioning eyes on me as the lawyer read. To make up for this, I leave the rest of my estate to him, with the exception of the Via Livia on Cato Antiquari, which goes to Claire Bennett. Anger and disbelief burned through my gut. The bulk of the estate and all its responsibilities I'd expected, but nothing could have prepared me to hear her name mentioned.
Who?
My sisters said in unison. There is one more condition that impacts you all, Petrakis continued, ignoring their reactions. Everything, including my daughter's portions, will be held in trust for my son until he is married, the lawyer read. Antonio must marry by his 25th birthday. If he fails to do so, all of my children will be disinherited. Alexandra gasped.
But his birthday is next month. That's absurd. Had our father gone crazy?
That's his idea of righting wrongs. I was almost too incredulous to speak. Petrakis put a protective hand on the document. Your father was of sound mind. I rose and paced to the far end of the room to look out a window as I struggled to regain my composure. My father could be cruel in life, ruthless and difficult, but I had never anticipated that his final act would be so twisted. I had to marry by next month or everything was lost to us? Ridiculous. I had connections in the business world and would find a place for myself even without an inheritance. But my sisters? They were still so young. Alexandra was just out of university, and Eva was only now about to begin. How could my father have done this to them? There must be a way to fight this. How do we contest this farce, Petrakis? I asked without turning. If you contest the will, you will automatically forfeit your inheritance and that of your sisters. That clause was in the first paragraph. If that should happen, then only the other bequests, including the one to Claire Bennett, will be honored.
Claire. I heard my name. I spoke from the doorway. My apologies for being late. My flight was delayed. Are you Nick Stavos? The older man in the expensive suit didn't look much like a documentary filmmaker, but perhaps he was the financial backer for the project. As I waited for a reply, the room seemed to still. The two young women seated at the table stared at me with surprise and hostility in their expressions. Another man stood at a window with his back to me. Was he the filmmaker? Possibly. If so, I had some questions for him, such as what was I doing here in the first place? My work doing voiceovers for documentaries rarely required me to be on site. Arranging the trip at the last minute had been a hassle. Still, I wouldn't complain too much. It wasn't as if I truly minded an excuse to travel to Greece. If anything, I was looking forward to the chance to create some new memories here. Memories that would hopefully help me forget those horrible last few days from when I'd been here as a student. I wanted to let those memories go. Wanted to forget about the heartache and anger I still carried around with me. Maybe this trip would help me finally move on. I hope so, anyway.
You're Claire, the younger of the two women asked after a tense moment. Claire Bennett?
Yes, I was supposed to meet with...
Have a seat, Miss Bennett, the older man spoke. There, at the head of the table, will do. My name is Georgios Petrakis. I am the one who arranged for you to be here. You're in the right place.
Was I, though? Because something about this didn't feel right. For one thing, the women were staring at me as if they'd seen a ghost. And while the man by the window still hadn't turned to face me, I could see the tension in the line of his shoulders. It was clear they'd all been discussing something about me before I'd arrived. And it didn't seem like any of them were happy with what they'd heard. Had they changed their mind about hiring me? After flying me all the way out here? I set only my purse down, reluctant to commit to sitting while there was such a strange tension in the air. Is there a problem with my contract? I asked. Should I speak to my agent? Despite the time change, I knew Brenna was awake. I'd called my best friend turned agent not long after my flight had landed to check in. Brenna had been so excited about this great opportunity, the perfect resume builder, she'd said. Maybe it had been too perfect, too good to be true. "There is work for you," the older man assured me, "but I will admit I used a bit of subterfuge to bring you here today. Your role on the film doesn't actually require your presence here in Greece. You were brought here for the reading of a will." What? This was getting weirder by the second, but curiosity kept me in place.
Whose will?
"My father's." The man at the window turned and strode toward me. Antonio Rosso stared at me, his eyes ice cold, just as they had been the last time I'd seen him, when his father had humiliated me.
"Matthias Rosso,"